This is a power supply. And this is also a power supply. Now the difference is, this is a standard ATX unit. This one's 475 watts. If you look at the cabling there, it's just normal cabling, a little bit of ketchup and mustard cabling there, a little bit of sleeved cabling as well on the 24 pin there. So it's a decent unit. It's not amazing, it's a little bit old, but this on the other hand is what you call a modular power supply. Now this one is semi-modular in that it has all of these peripheral powers that you can plug in to the unit itself. So if you, for instance, have, it's labeled there, hopefully you can see it, PCI power, PCI Express. So those are for graphics cards. So let's say you have a 3080 and you might need two of these. And these go to usually 6 plus 2 pin powers. So that's what that looks like. It's 6 little pins and then you get an extra 2. And the reason for that is some graphics cards need an extra 75 watts. Some need an extra 100 watts. Depending on what your graphics card needs, you'll see in the graphics card itself, and I'll show this a bit later, that you need to plug it into the card. And then it has another one for some cards need a lot of power and they'll take a full 16 extra pins. But then this power supply, being a 900 watt unit, can take even more. So it can support 2 cards with 16 pins, so it supplies a lot of power. Now what makes this a semi-modular power supply, as I said, is all of these peripheral powers are removable, but this, the 24 pin power, the main power, is always plugged into the unit itself. A fully modular power supply will have this be also removable, and that's what that looks like. That goes straight into your motherboard, and then most motherboards these days, all of them, also require a extra 4 or 8 pins of motherboard power, usually close to the CPU. So these are power supplies, and they come in many sizes, colors, form factors. Sometimes now they have the pins at the side, which is quite neat. This is a switching power supply. This is not, and that just means that it supports different voltages for different countries. So with that said, we're gonna build one of these, probably this one because this one's too big, into that case over there, and I'll show you how to do it, and I'll show you how to plug it into everything that's necessary. So with that said, let's build it. So this is a graphics card, obviously. You've probably seen one of these, and some graphics cards have higher power delivery requirements, as I just mentioned in the previous part of the video. Now the reason I'm showing you this is it's too big for that case, so I'm not actually going to put it in the case, but I just want you to know this. If you are a person starting out with computers, you don't know a lot about computers, and you want to know how power works in computers. So what happens is you have your graphics card, and your graphics card has power delivery through the PCI Express lane, and then some graphics cards need more power, and they will have an additional power delivery system. So this one has, as you can see there, 8 plus 6. So this one takes quite a lot of power, probably around 150 watts to 200 watts. It's an older card, it's a GTX 760. So these cards did used to use more power back in the day. But I'm just showing you this so that you know, okay, that power pin will most probably be need to plug in here. What happens when you don't plug it in, either your system is going to say, please connect supplementary power to graphics card, or it won't boot, or in some cases it will boot, but your graphics card will be undervolted, and it might even burn out because it's not getting enough power. So that's just something to look out for when you are building a PC, and when you are learning about computers, and that is how power delivery works to graphics cards. For some cards like the GTX 1650, the RX series of 6500, 6400 cards. Some of them don't need the extra power, they just need the PCI power. And even some of the RTX cards, but this will come at a cost to performance. So these are usually mobile cards or something like that. So yeah, that's pretty much the short version of how graphics card power works, and why you always need to connect the where are the power connectors. It's vital that you do that, and it's vital that you make sure you have a big enough power supply to run the graphics card that you have and that you want to run. So with that said, let's build in the computer and I'll show you where to connect the relevant power pins. It's pretty simple. Let's do it. Okay, so here we have the PC chassis that we're going to build the power supply into. This is the power supply, as I've shown you already. And yeah, it's pretty simple. So the first thing that's relevant is the power supply basement. Now, most modern cases come with these, and these are just a way to hide the power supply. So they used to be sort of at the top and you would see them here, or at the bottom. Now they have this, what's called a power supply basement, and the power supply goes in there. It's pretty simple. So let's do that. It'll take a second. So we're going to remove our side panel, the back panel. Put those screws down. Remove it. The hard drive cage. This one has an SSD at the top and a hard drive at the bottom. Now, modern cases are a fair bit smaller and some are taller than what they used to be. So that means it can be hard for power supplies to fit sometimes, and because of this you get different size power supplies. This one is a standard ATX power supply and this is a standard ATX case, but it is a tight squeeze. So what you do is you orient it the correct way, which in this case I believe is this way. I think that's right. You can check the direction of the fan. Some people prefer the fan to blow up, some prefer down, but some cases like this one only allows the power supply to go in one way. I just need to establish which way that is. So let's put it in. So you just slide it in here at the bottom, and then you line it up at the back like so. Let me show you. So you'll see it's lined up and the screw holes all line up correctly. That's relevant because we need to screw this in, so we're going to do that quickly. Let me get some screws and a screwdriver. Okay, so for the screws you just want your standard black, well, they don't have to be black, but your standard screws that are just used for computing. It's kind of not really focusing right now, but yeah, it's just a normal screw. And then you just kind of hold the power supply and you start to screw it in like so. Now you want this to be tight, but you don't want it to be so tight that you strip the screws. So just tighten it nicely, but don't overdo it. I really like these self-torquing screwdrivers because they just they make it easy and quick. Okay, another screw, same sort of screw. Put it in, fasten it. That's done. Another one. So some power supplies have these sort of brackets that you have to put in, and then you fasten the power supply to the bracket. But this is just a standard case, so it doesn't have anything like that. For this one, you just fasten it straight onto the case, and this is going to be the most common way that this is done. But some cases do it a little bit more fancily. Okay, I'm going to put away the screws now. I'm not going to need the screwdrivers anymore. And what we're going to do now, you'll see we have all of the cables, so we're going to turn it around and we are going to remove the side panel. Now this is a glass side panel, You can have a glass one, a acrylic one, steel one, plastic one, but usually these days they come in tempered glass, so be careful not to drop it. It is tempered, but it's not necessarily shatterproof. Okay, so we have our glass. We're just going to slide that off and put it somewhere safe where you can see them and we know where they are. Okay, so now obviously the motherboard and everything is already in here. We're not running a graphics card on this one. I already spoke to you about the graphics card, and I'll show you in a minute if there were a graphics card what we would do. But what you're going to do is you're going to feed through the correct cables. So we want this one, the big one. This is the 24-pin power cable that provides the main source of power to your motherboard. Now, in most cases, this will be going into the uppermost or the second uppermost slot on the cable slot. So that's another thing about cases now. They usually have these slots where you can feed through cables, and this is just a quality of life thing. But what you do is you just check where your 24-pin cable slot is, the insert slot for the power, and then when you have that, you insert it, and then you do the same thing for the motherboard power, which is the 8 or 16-pin power at the top, usually at the upmost back slot. We will check, yep, it's right over there, and these are the kind of smaller 4-pin cables. So we'll feed that through. There we go. Now what I'm going to do, coming back, I'm going to plug in those cables. So for the 24-pin power cable, over here, you just take it like so. You check the little tie, and you check that it lines up in the correct orientation on the motherboard, and then you bend it the way that it should go, and you hold the motherboard at the back and you just push it in like so. So that's pretty simple. Make sure it is secure and fastened. That feels good. And there you have it. That's quite simple. And then you do the same thing for the little 4-pin at the top. Now this motherboard only needs one 4-pin, as you can see there. Most will need 2. So all you do is you check the orientation of the notch, and this can be difficult. So sometimes it's better to remove the fans if you have them and then do this, or when you are inserting the motherboard, do this straight away. But put that in, and there we go. Pretty simple. And then for the sake of neatness, I'm just going to let this extra one hang at the back, just so that you don't see it through the glass. Okay, and that's really all there is to the main sources of power in a computer. Now, of course, to power this on, you'll need to plug in your I/O, your little jumper cables at the bottom here. But that's a video for another day. This is more just the power. You can also jump those. That's also a way to start your computer if you haven't plugged it in yet. So this is done in terms of power delivery to the motherboard and the CPU. And then we need to also, this case has 3 fans at the top here, at the front here. Now, this is powered by what's called a Molex connector, which looks like this. Now these ones, 3 fans at the front, are daisy chained into this connector, and this is a low delivery, older style connector that isn't really used much these days, but it's cheaper to use and cheaper to fabricate, so some cases do use them and some fans do. So you find your Molex connector, which looks like, these are SATA connectors. These are for hard drives and other peripherals. And this is a Molex connector. Sorry, I can't really pull it up much, but that's what it looks like. So it's like this, but it's the output, not the input. And then you connect those like so. They kind of just slide into each other. It's pretty easy. And then apart from that, we also need to connect our hard drives at the bottom here. So you search for a SATA connector. I'm just going to feed this graphics card power delivery through here. We're not going to use it, but I just want to show you when we're done with the hard drives. So we'll talk about cable management in a bit too. Okay, so now I'm going to plug in the SSD. Made a little bit of a mess. And there you are. You just plug your SATA cable into your SSD. If you have an NVMe drive which goes straight onto the motherboard, you don't even need to worry about this. This is just for the standard SATA SSDs. And then in terms of cable management, so you have these cable tie points. They look like that. I'm not going to manage this right now because I'm going to remove it again. But these points are, you feed a cable tie through them, and then it comes around and you tighten it like this, and then it just keeps the cables neat and tidy firmly against the case. And that way you can put the side panel back on the back panel and it'll close up nicely. And then when you have a little bit of a rat's nest like this, you just sort of search for a spot that you can just put it in, and then you just push all of this in there. Just make sure nothing's going to short or connect with each other. This is very unneat right now. You'll usually find the best solution for cables before doing this. This is just a demonstration, but you can just put all of this into the computer, into the power supply basement, wherever you can find some space, and it'll look a lot better. And then lastly, let's talk about the graphics card power delivery. So this is a PCI Express power delivery. This is a 6-pin one, and then it has this little 2-pin extra. So this can power an additional, I'm not sure exactly, maybe 75 watts, maybe a little bit more. So you just pull this, and then if you have a graphics card here at your PCI slot, it'll just get plugged into the graphics card like so, like I explained before this part. So we don't have a graphics card right now. This is just illustration. And that's about it for the presentation. Let me just quickly conclude with a few thoughts and a few words about it. Let's do it. So that's it for the little video about how to use power supplies, what they are, what they do, how their power delivery works. One thing that I do need to stress about power supplies is that you should never open them if you're not a trained technician. They hold a massive amount of charge most of the time, and they have some serious components in them. And you know, the capacitors, when one of those blow, you can seriously injure yourself and you can even die. It has happened. So what I'm saying is be careful when you work with power supplies. They are consumer products. They are made to work and take a little bit of a beating, but you should be careful and you should never open them if you don't know what you're doing. To clean them, don't blow compressed air into them, because that can hurt components and it can damage fans as well. So to clean them, just remove the little cover at the top, the little metal cover, and don't open the casing. Just remove the little fan cover. Clean the fan with a cloth or a whatever cleaning solution you have for plastic, and you can blow lightly inside the little box for the power supply, but be careful and don't open them, and yeah, just always exercise caution when working with them. Another thing to note is you should always make sure that the power supply you've selected is enough to power your components, and you want to avoid extremely cheap power supplies because they can start electrical fires and they can severely damage or destroy your components. So always be careful about that. So a power supply is sometimes an underappreciated and undervalued part of a computer, because if you think about it, the motherboard is the brain. Well, the CPU is the brain, but the motherboard is sort of like the delivery system for information. But for that power, for that delivery to be able to happen, you need power, and you need reliable power. And I think it's very important that you spend a decent amount of money on a good power supply, because in the long run, that is the electricity running through your computer. So always be careful with that, and always make sure that you buy quality components. There is a power supply tier list that I will link in the bottom of my video in the description, that you can check out for the quality of different brands and different units of power supplies. So with that said, thanks for watching the video. Let me know what you thought about it. Let me know if you like these tutorial instruction kind of videos, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Let me know what you think of the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.